Kay Sumner is an Emmy nominated producer and film director who's received 2 People's Choice Awards. Her claim to fame includes being the co creator and producer of the renowned show The Dog Whisperer with Cesar Millan. But her most recent project aims to change lives.
Heroin is an isolative drug. I like to be by myself with my heroin. Nobody else. It's me and heroin.
When I was really in the depths of my addiction, if I didn't have anything to do that day, I would take a shot. 5 or 10 minutes later, another shot. Sometimes I'd prepare 2 syringes so I could do them one after the other.
I remember having a friend, and you go over to his house. It's a very normal house, 2 dogs, cars, little kids, and the car's not there. What happened to your car, man? Where's your car? I sold it. Why did you sell your car? Because I needed to get drugs.
And thus begins the narrative of Survivor, the latest creation from Kay Sumner and her husband, Murray. This compelling documentary ventures into the real stories of triumph over opioid addiction and the heart-wrenching tales of loss. However, for the Sumners, the film is more than just a project. It's a channel for grief and a heartfelt tribute to their late son. A talented musician, their own son's life was tragically cut short by a drug overdose at the age of 43.
First of all, I am determined that one life has been stolen, it's not going to steal my life. I am going to try to be, and I think Murray feels the same way, as active as we can to change the dialogue. I produced Dog Whisperer, and we changed the dialogue about dogs. People walk their dogs now. Now I want to change the dialogue about kids being addicted. It's not your kids that are wildly partying that are doing heroin, fentanyl. It's the sensitive ones. It's the really kind, thoughtful ones.
A story that hits close to home for thousands of parents, including me. I'm Angela Kennecke. This is Grieving Out Loud. I hope today's conversation leaves you informed, empowered, and perhaps even changes the course of this challenging narrative. Well, Kay and Murray, welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I always say this when I interview parents who have also lost a child to overdose/fentanyl poisoning, that I'm so grateful to meet you, but I'm so sorry about the circumstances that bring us together.
Yes.
We agree.
And your son, Josh, he was a little older than many parents that I talk to whose children have died. So tell me about Josh, and how many kids do you guys have?
We have 4 kids and 5 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
Yes.
And where was Josh in all of that?
Josh was the youngest. He was born on my birthday, which kind of ruins all birthdays. He was a jazz musician, and he was in New York when he started this, from what I understand. We felt we were very close to him. We talked to him a lot. We made sure we went to New York, and he came here to visit us. He loved music from the time he was like 10 years old, and the saxophone was bigger than him. And he had to wait a while to get bigger to actually play the saxophone.
Yeah.
And then he was obsessed with it. And a teacher from school said, "Look, this kid really has talent. You need to invest in special teachers," and so, which we did. It was in Toronto in the winter. I was taking him to these lessons, and it would be, 20 below in the snow, driving him way the heck out to this jazz musician that taught. So early on, we found that that's really what he wanted to do. He wasn't interested in sports. He wasn't interested that much in anything else. It just absorbed him.
It sounds like he had incredible talent. Also, you sacrificed a lot for your child, which I think we all did as parents, right? And then to have their story end this way seems like such a waste in a way. But I think about the talent that Josh had as a musician. My daughter was a talented artist. So many people I talk to whose children either become addicted or die from their addiction have kids that were very talented and also very sensitive. Was Josh sensitive?
Very.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, it's one of the keys that everything hits them harder.
Yes.
Everything emotionally can be stronger. To tell you about his personality, though, once he could play the saxophone at like 12, we took him to a place where he could, out in the street.
Busk.
Yeah.
Took him to street busking.
Oh,
Yeah, it was quite comical because, it was clear that he had a talent and he wasn't going to get another job. So he said, okay, we're going to put you down on the street and you're going to busk for a living and see see what these talented musicians actually do to make a living.
Where we watched him.
Yeah. You were nearby. You were nearby. You didn't just drop your kid off. It's like, got it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he made so much money. I think this is like the 80s. He got like a $20 tip. And by the time we left, he'd given it all away.
Oh, so a generous person
Very
as
generous
well.
person. Yeah.
Josh's spirit of generosity didn't stop there. When he made his way to the bustling streets of New York City in 2002 to chase his musical dreams, he extended a helping hand to young musicians also finding their footing in the city. He played a role in connecting them with affordable housing, a kind gesture that didn't go unnoticed. In fact, the New York Times recognized his efforts and showcased his story in one of their articles.
He was like a social worker, believe it or not. Young musicians used to come into New York to get involved in the jazz world. They didn't have a place to stay. So Josh introduced them to a vegetable seller who knew all the little old ladies in Harlem who had big apartments and not enough people in them because their children had grown up and left them alone. So between Josh had the kids and the vegetable player had the widows, and they teamed up to live together. It wasn't quite Airbnb, but the young men would go and take out the garbage and help the widows. So he was always helping people.
As Josh built up a network of positive connections, he also met a few people who would negatively impact his life. One of his fellow musicians guided him down a troubling path, introducing him to heroin at a time when he was grappling with a difficult breakup.
The trumpet player was a heroin addict, and he went through a rough point in his life. Here he is in a tiny little apartment with the woman he loves, and it didn't work out. It was difficult to live under the circumstances, and his trumpet player said, well, try this, you'll feel better. And indeed he did.
Yet that initial sense of euphoria quickly faded. In a matter of weeks, Josh was dealing with a hectic schedule of 3 jobs, all while wrestling a persistent heroin addiction. Even with these challenges, Josh managed to keep his struggles hidden from his family. Did he come to you at some point and say, I have a problem?
No, someone else told me. A girlfriend he was going out with said, did you know it? Because you couldn't tell. You absolutely couldn't tell his behavior. He looked kind of pale, but as a jazz musician, he's up at night all the time.
Also, we're on opposite coasts.
Yeah.
Sure. But at some point, did he turn to you for help then?
He didn't want us to know.
It's unfortunate, but also very common. Many times, family members are the last ones to find out when someone is struggling with addiction. On Grieving Out Loud, I've had the privilege of talking to dozens of people who face substance use disorder head-on. What's striking is how many of them felt this overwhelming sense of shame, which made it incredibly hard for them to confide in their own families. Just recently, we had an eye-opening chat in one of our podcast episodes with Chris Herron, a former NBA player. he shared his personal journey of wrestling with substance use disorder for years. What really struck me was how Chris went to great lengths to keep his struggle hidden from his wife and children. And at this time, you're married. You've been married this whole time. You've got little kids. Do they know what's going
No.
on? Are you hiding it?
Oh
What's
gosh,
happening?
I'm hiding it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I work really hard at it. That's the thing. I try to tell families that all the time. Like, my brain never stopped hiding. Everything in my life had to do with hiding. I worked really hard, and that's why sometimes families, they find out much later, because my brain was operating all day long on how to keep this going and not let anyone down that loved me.
Once Kay discovered her son was struggling with addiction, she made an effort to have conversations with him about it regularly. They discussed the issue as often as they could, working together to find solutions and treatment.
And he did go on Suboxone. And then he tried to get off really hard. He tried for a year to get off of it. Each day taking like a little bit less every day.
Do you think he really needed to get off of it? Do you think that was necessary? Because now I've heard that Suboxone is a gold standard for treating opioid addiction. And if you have to stay on it for years, you stay on it for years, whatever, as long as you're functioning well. If you're not familiar with the drug, it's now one of the main medications used to treat opioid addiction. However, it is an opiate, as some people are wary of the drug. But Dr. Hannah Statz-DeVries explains that it's a partial agonist of the main opiate receptor. That means it induces far less euphoria compared to other opiates like heroin and oxycodone.
It's a treatment that we have. We see people succeed. I see people that get jobs, they get their life back, they go on to be able to do the things that they once loved. It's what are you replacing? You're replacing an opioid. And some people can't get past that kind of picture of, gosh, I'm just replacing one with the other. And where I kind of try to counsel patients is, hey, we're providing you something that we know what it is. We're helping you. We're getting you through treatment. We're getting you to some sobriety. And in the future, should you want to try to taper off of this, we can give it a try. I just ask that you're honest with me if you're struggling with
How
it.
many people need to be on it, like forever? Can you be on it forever?
You can. What I will say is I have seen people come off it and relapse. Year of sobriety, and they're like, hey, I want to stop. I'll say, if you're ready and you want to do this, just please work with me, talk with me. Let me know how this goes. And then I've had patients stop it that actually did it on their own, kept continuing to see me, and they said, hey, I'm down to 1 milligram. I'm like, wait, what? And they just didn't want to be on it because they saw it as a crutch. And so close follow-up and, making sure they've got those other supports can be helpful too.
Kay says her son hated the thought of being addicted to anything. He worked hard to quit using Suboxone, but looking back, that may not have been the best choice.
And the last thing I really clearly remember him saying to me is he knocked on my door. He was visiting us and said, Mom, I got through the night with no Suboxone, because he'd taken just a tiny little bit less every couple of days to gradually wean himself up. Then he went back to New York to the same people, started getting panicky that he couldn't play his saxophone without it, or he wouldn't be as talented. I don't know. The cravings got to him. He tried to go to AA for drug addicted people, but there were dealers outside. He said the temptation was just, you come out of the meeting and the dealers will be lined up to sell to you.
Handing out free samples.
Yeah. Ultimately, what happened then?
He was seemingly doing well, but when he went back to New York, he was around the same old people. The cravings got to him. We're talking, he was in here in October and he died December 7th. So it wasn't very long.
He had a gig that afternoon, actually. He was found that next day.
In his apartment or?
Yes,
Where
he was
was he?
found in his
Yeah.
apartment where he lived alone.
At 43 years old, Josh was at the height of his musical career when he died from taking heroin laced with fentanyl. Here's Josh playing the song, If Ever I Should Leave You. How do you think you've best coped with the loss of Josh?
Well, first of all, I am determined that one life has been stolen and it's not going to steal my life. I am going to try to be, and I think Murray feels the same way, as active as we can to change the dialogue. I produced Dog Whisperer, and we changed the dialogue about dogs. People walk their dogs now. Now I want to change the dialogue about kids being addicted. It's not your kids that are wildly partying that are doing heroin, fentanyl. It's the sensitive ones. It's the really kind, thoughtful ones that are hurting it. And we might not even know why they're hurting. And it can be so accidental. They can just try something at a party. And now when you add fentanyl to the mix,
Right.
it's even in candy. It's a local 7-year-old who died because she was given a candy at school for a friend.
I know. That's one of the things we're trying to teach in our education curriculum is that for kids, they can't take anything from anybody. It's terrifying. It's a terrifying world right now with fentanyl in it. But you are really trying to do something about it with your filmmakers. And so it's a natural fit that you would put out a film called Survivors, Untold Stories in America's Opioid Crisis. And I've been watching that documentary. I'm just blown away by it.
Thank you.
Yes, we have at this point, I think, 23 film festival awards
Congratulations.
from both Europe, North America, and a couple places around the world.
But, from the rank and file people, middle class people, they don't believe it's going to happen to their kids. I didn't believe it.
Me too.
And it's hard to get them to watch anything or even talk about it. They just want to change the subject. So with that film, we took those middle class people. We wanted to understand in my mind, doing heroin would be the last thing I would possibly want to do. How could anybody get trapped with it? Why would they want to? So I had to figure it out. Murray and I decided we would go and we would ask. And so we asked about 50 people. The people on the film are just examples.
Examples of people taking that first step of trying a substance, then finding their way through the depths of addiction, and finally a path to recovery. But let's face it, in some gut-wrenching instances, it ends with heartbreak and loss. Here's a sneak peek from the documentary.
I was the head of cheerleading and he was a football captain. But we were top of our class. We were very popular. We weren't what you would look and say, oh, they have a problem. We didn't go to any bad part of town to start doing drugs. It came to us.
It was a very comfortable neighborhood, everybody, working families, but for the most part, it was upper middle class as well. So all their kids went to college, everybody took vacations, and, we had barbecues.
It was a nice neighborhood, a 2-story house. Our kids went to a great school. We had all that we thought that we needed in life.
I was injured at work. I worked in a factory and hurt my back and had 2 surgeries. I was prescribed pain medicine, Percocet. And I went through about a year and a half of being very addicted to the Percocet.
I started on pain pills. It was a Vicodin that I took for the very first time from my boyfriend. And I had up until that point bragged that I could not get addicted to anything. And so I took it kind of innocently, thinking this is, just another drug I'm going to do and move on with my life. And I remember the first time that I took it feeling like this is it. I felt like it was what I had needed. It numbed me enough inside that it was like, I love this. Let's do this.
We have this thing called social media, and it's now become cool to post pictures of yourself getting loaded at parties. And high schoolers are doing this on a regular, getting loaded at the whole drug scene. It's looked upon as like a cool thing now. I've had buddies post videos of themselves snorting lines of cocaine and just getting hammered at parties. And then you look at all the comments on there, people would be like, save me a line.
As the Sumners channeled their own grief into their filmmaking, it became a way to turn their sorrow into something positive. However, there were moments when listening to the stories were overwhelming.
I would go in the bathroom and choke back the tears and say, hey, wait a minute, you're a professional. You've been doing this kind of stuff for 40 years. You can get out there and you can just be professional. And there's many stories that didn't make it that were chilling.
We have about 50 hours of interviews that we had to cut down to less than an hour.
That had to be really tough. As someone who's had to edit things, I don't know, that had to be a really
Right.
tough job.
But the thing is, they're all good stories, and we plan on putting them up in whole without editing, really, because it was people pouring out their hearts about this and where they came from and where they ended up. And they're all very, very interesting stories. And so at some point, we'll probably have them up on YouTube.
And from all walks of life, I found that to be really interesting.
Yes.
You had professional people, you had young people, you had middle-aged people with families. We all have certain ideas in our head, even though this has happened in our family, of like, who is going to do something like that? And it could be anybody. You just don't know.
Well,
And-
yeah, some people just got in a car accident and the pain wouldn't go away and they turned to heroin. It destroyed their life. But we talked to a rehab counselor yesterday and he said, I want heroin back because fentanyl is killing everybody. Not as many people died of heroin.
We kind of feel like we're standing on train tracks and there's a runaway train in the distance coming our way, and we're trying to flag it down, but there's no way that train is ever going to stop to not destroy us and everyone else in its path. So our mission now is to try to get ahead of what is out there and to do other documentaries or other informative PSAs. But I think the world really needs to know that, well, these aren't your average derelicts who are living under the bridge. This is
They could become
our
so, but-
family,
Yeah.
our kids, our middle class, upper class students in high school, the achievers. And we don't, as filmmakers, know how to get ahead of this right now.
The Sumners, without a doubt, are giving it their all. They've established a nonprofit named Not One More Time, Inc., with the goal of raising awareness about the pressing drug crisis through documentaries and educational resources. To get all the details about the nonprofit and to watch the full documentary, just head to this podcast show notes. While you're there, we truly appreciate your support. A 5-star review and sharing this podcast with friends and family helps drive our mission even further, decreasing the stigma surrounding substance use disorder, getting more people into treatment, and hopefully preventing future tragedies. Did you learn anything while you made the documentary that you didn't know before?
Many things
Yeah.
because it was, well, why don't you stop doing this? But I found out it's practically impossible to stop. That the sickness, how sick they get, is terrifying. Even with Josh getting off Suboxone, he said his legs were kicking. He couldn't control it. He couldn't sleep. He'd be sweating. He'd be throwing up. It's just very, very difficult. And then after getting off, the cravings overwhelmed him. So I think we got to start looking at, are there any solutions? Well, changing the dialogue to get away that these are the bad kids to, well, what are the solutions? Because rehab is not working that well either.
No. That's why I'm so committed to prevention. I think we've got to make sure people, as many people as possible, don't ever start in the first place, right? But you haven't had all happy outcomes with some of your interview subjects in the documentary either, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, early on, we found out about Chris, and he was a poster child of recovery. And somehow something happened, and he went back and he died. And then we found out 2 weeks ago that Shayna died, and she was, throughout the whole story, she was so bold about talking about, she was a drug counselor as well. So I'm kind of heartbroken for all the kids that she was working with. She had so many friends, and she was such a delightful person. But again, her heart was broken over a romantic situation. So when the emotions come in and they don't have a way of solving it, I think they turn to drugs again.
Right. You would think that the fentanyl out there would be enough to stop people, but nothing. stops people who suffer from this disease of the brain sometimes,
Right.
you know. And you talk a lot about recovery as well in the documentary because you do have people in recovery. Yes, they can relapse and die, or they may stay in recovery. Was there a common thread that you found? I know they always say that connection is the solution to addiction. Was there a common thread that you found in recovery?
I think faith, the people who really believed in God and turned themselves over, went to church and had people support them, because your social life through this process gets killed. Initially, if you start drugs, your normal friends want to shy away from it. And then you have your drug friends. And then once you want to get off of it, then you lose your drug friends. So the different programs people got into, some to church, to AA, numerous ones. I think that engagement with AA and the 12-step program is very positive.
We interviewed a rabbi because we did test screenings of our film, and people said, it's just a little too slanted on the faith-based stuff.
Oh, but this is what people were telling you, right? I mean, as a
Yeah.
journalist who interviews people, I would say what they're saying is their story, and that's what I would report, right?
Exactly. So, in order to balance it a little bit, we wanted one more perspective, and it is faith-based, but it was a rabbi who runs a recovery program down in Culver City, California here. Very successful, about an 80% success rate, actually, of recovery, which we found outstanding because rehabs, which are all prevalent here in California, are probably reporting about 20%. And it's all motivated by insurance money, et cetera, but we won't go there. The point is, the rabbi said, I'm not concerned about sobriety. I'm concerned about recovery. He said, I know lots of people who are sober who do terrible things. But what I'm concerned about, he says, is I'm recovering my spirit, recovering my soul, recovering my life again. So it's a spiritual problem. It's a hole in our heart that everyone tries to fill with all of these other things other than, in our opinion, their faith.
Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. Or love, or a greater power, or whatever you want to call it, but
Right.
something other than food, sex, drugs, whatever people might turn to
Right.
to fill that emptiness.
We've actually had people want to edit any reference to Jesus out. And we're like, I'm sorry, it might be a more popular movie, but this is their story. And I'm not going to change anybody's story to make a film more popular.
Mhm.
So we've been very firm about that.
Well, and just as no two people are the same, no two addictions are the same, and what may work for someone may not work for somebody else. But if there is a common thread, people need to know about it, and because it might work for them, right?
Right.
Mhm.
And so, where are you taking this from here? What's next for you?
Well, one of the most interesting things we're doing, we've teamed up with a college. Santa Monica College has a film program, and we're doing an Ethos Film Festival, and we're doing a contest for shorts, like 1 or 2 minutes, which would be anti-drug messages produced by college students, hopefully across the country, all for TikTok, Instagram, because that's where the kids are. They're not watching TV. The place they're going to be is on TikTok or Instagram, so,
Mhm.
or the other ones. So that's the contest we're going to be running. And then the shorts will be featured at the Ethos Film Festival in November in Santa Monica.
And our foundation is offering a $1,000 cash prize for the winner.
Well, that's awesome.
Yes. And hopefully it'll motivate kids to make these. I think if they make the message, you have to do a certain amount of research in order to do a film, as you know. And if they do the research, they're going to learn in the process more about drugs.
Has this all helped you too with your grief over the loss of your son, the work that you've done with the documentary, the foundation? Has it helped you?
I'm more mad in a way than grieved because I've had some really wonderful dreams about him. So now I'm just sort of mad. I'm mad at people for not waking up. I'm mad at people for avoiding the subject, classifying kids that have done this. The grief, I mean, I find myself looking at pictures when he was 5 years old, missing him, looking at pictures when he was 20, I miss him at all different ages. It's
Right. How about you, Murray? I know people grieve differently. Moms and dads grieve differently.
They do. And as Josh's stepfather, that's a different level of connection. I came into Josh's life when he was literally in my wife's belly. And so, I knew him his entire life. And, his first words were said to me. So, but it's different with mothers, I think, than it is with fathers, no matter whether you're a stepfather or a father. As men, we grow up conditioned to bottling up your emotions and not expressing them. Well, I happen to be a very sensitive person and I don't work that way, but my grief is just different than hers and I express it in ways. And we agreed just early on, look, we cannot wallow in this. We really need to take the talents, our God-given talents, and basically come out of retirement and tell the world this story. So that's what Survivors is.
Well, thank you for doing that. On that note, we'll wrap up the podcast. We'll put the documentary right on our webpage. We'll share links in all the show notes and we'll spread the word because I want as many people to watch this as possible. It's very powerful. Thank you for making it.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you for interviewing us.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Grieving Out Loud. Don't forget to explore other episodes and make sure to join us next week for an impactful conversation. We'll be sitting down with one of the millions of grandparents who've taken on the role of raising their grandchildren due to the fentanyl epidemic. As we wrap up today, we're leaving you with a final glimpse from the documentary Survivors. Until we meet again, wishing you faith, hope, and courage.
One of the things that I see a lot of the time is kids that started using medication that wasn't prescribed for them out of their parents' or a friend's parents' medicine cabinet. And they're going in, they're looking at the prescription bottle and they're saying, may cause drowsiness, do not operate heavy machinery. And they go, oh, that's it right there. That's what you're looking for. And that's where a kid starts.
When I started using drugs, it was just whatever was available at the party I was at. And it really started out for me with ecstasy because that was a party drug. You would go to a party, you would take some ecstasy, you would feel amazing and have energy and you would be loving everyone there.
It has nothing to do with how smart you are, has nothing to do with how athletic you are, how popular you are, how wealthy or poor you are. It has to do with the want to fit in, that group mentality. We like company as human beings. We like to be accepted and we quest for that throughout our lives as acceptance. So especially when you're young, you don't really know anything about the world and you're just kind of growing up and you have all these hormones surging through your head and your body. You don't know anything. You have no experience. You're going to do whatever makes you accepted. And that's just human nature.
This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Anna Phi.